Hello there, and welcome back to the channel. The weekend of August 1st, 2026 will be remembered as one of the craziest moments in film history. According to Variety, the US market reached approximately $430 million across every film that released that weekend. This was of course powered by Spider-Man Brand New Day, which got an insane $360 million, followed by The Odyssey, which earned another $51 million in its third weekend. Other films of note were Toy Story 5, which earned 6.7 mil, Minions and Monsters, which got 5.9 mil, and Obsession has just continued its powerhouse of a run with another $500,000 in its 12th weekend. And if Paramount wasn't an idiotic company, this likely would have been even bigger, as it would have been The Legend of Aang's second weekend. I still can't believe they did that. This would have been an absolute treat to watch in theaters. Anyways, this has been quite the crazy summer. And it's not over yet, as Spider-Man just started its run and Coyote v Acme releases at the end of the month. Please watch that movie, guys. We fought so hard for it to come out. This is all pretty insane, as the common consensus was that movie theaters were dying. After all, this summer was also filled with plenty of big movies that were dead on arrival. This all shows is that people won't just show up to any movie solely because of name recognition. They're not just going to accept anything that feels corporate. However, they will show up to movies that have passion and are worthy of seeing on the big screen. The reason why I and so many others love the theater experience is because it provides a sense of community. Everyone is automatically connected by the same interest, and we're all expressing our emotions and reactions at the same time. Sure, watching a movie at home might be more comfortable or convenient, but you'll never get the same thrills or collective joy as you do in a theater. This has been such an interesting summer at the box office, and in this video I'm going to go over why the projects that succeeded did so well, and why others were completely dead on arrival. Let's begin with the peak. The biggest movie this summer was Spider-Man Brand New Day. Now, I knew people were hyped about this movie, but I didn't realize they were this hyped. I watched the movie the Thursday evening it came out, and I kid you not, I have not seen a theater this packed since The Force Awakens. Just the line to scan your tickets was going outside the building. There's also a ton of people in different variants of Spider-Man costumes. It was pretty awesome to see people express themselves this way. I hadn't realized I didn't own any Spidey merch till the day of, so I opted to wear an Avengers shirt. Like a lot of people, I was initially worried the movie was going to be overstuffed given just how many characters appeared in the trailer, but
boy were they wrong!
I'm going to give my review for the film, so if you haven't seen the movie, skip to this part of the video. Please watch this movie as blind as possible. Sorry Daredevil, it's a figure of speech. Anyways, yeah, this movie was peak. The emotional core is what really sold this film for me. I mean, every scene with Peter and MJ was just gut-wrenching. Look, I really liked Jean Grey's character here, but I'm sorry, I can never forgive her for pretending to be MJ. Making Peter believe she remembered him is genuinely Reverse Flash behavior. Dog, going so far as to kiss him was nasty work.
It was me, Barry.
The fight scenes were incredible. I know a lot of more practical effects were used here, so that makes him feel a lot more real. Tom Holland actually confirmed that a ton of the sequences were inspired by the Insomniac games, specifically the finishers, and it really shows.
Yeah, for me, a lot of those finishing moves, a lot of our stuff was influenced by that stuff.
This was also the first time in a while I was genuinely interested in the world building of the MCU. Obviously, as Peter is going through this emotional breakdown, he's trying to suppress his arachnid genes through a universal inhibitor. Given Jean Grey officially introduces the mutants into this universe, we can see how these inhibitors might become a problem down the line for the X-Men. Bruce Banner mentions as much to Peter. I mean, in many ways, this was sort of an X-Men movie. You see a multitude of people with enhanced abilities coming to grips with the powers they have, just how different they are, forced to choose whether to embrace their abilities or reject them. It's such a great symbolism for the grief these characters are going through. Oh, and going back to Banner, I am so glad we got the real Hulk back. My theater was clapping at his return. And the way in which they did it made complete sense. He didn't just turn up out of the blue. Jean Grey broke Banner's mind, causing the big guy to make an insane return. The MCU never really explained Hulk's position after Endgame. Like, in that movie, he turned into Professor Hulk, only to go back to, regular Bruce Banner, and then back to Professor Hulk. It's just confusing, because I thought the whole point of Endgame was that the Hulk and Banner formed a symbiotic relationship. Brand New Day sort of answers this. It seems like Banner created the inhibitor so that he could appear normal in certain situations the Hulk's body wouldn't be conducive to. Transportation is probably the biggest one, and I'm sure there's a ton of liability issues if Banner accidentally destroys property. But obviously, suppressing the Hulk for too long made him angry, so when Jean Grey messed with Banner's head, the big guy came out. And even if there wasn't a proper explanation, I would have been happy regardless because the Hulk has been disrespected for way too long. The fight between Spidey and Hulk was absolute cinema. Dude literally clapped him up. This movie really reminded me why I used to love the MCU. You've got a plethora of characters crossing over in a fashion that makes complete sense, so you're essentially combining a great story with amazing spectacle. I wasn't really expecting Jean Grey to be the primary antagonist of the film, but it honestly worked really well. Stranger Things really prepared Sadie Sink for this role, and she honestly may have been my favorite performance in this movie. She's got an amazing career ahead of her, unlike the rest of the Stranger Things cast.
I don't like girls.
Peter really should have known damage control was sus, especially as they were the ones who harassed him at the beginning of No Way Home. But I guess after so many years, he thought they turned a new leaf. Oh, and as always, the Punisher was great. His dynamic with Spidey was so natural. It was a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. I was admittedly a bit annoyed Yelena called Spider-Man small potatoes when big potatoes are apparently overturning a cement wall. Spidey could literally one-shot every member of the Thunderbolts. And no, I'm not counting Sentry as he became a new Avenger at the end of the movie. But Yelena is always a treat to see, so I kind of just waved it off. Overall, this was an amazing time at the theater, and its box office performance is completely understandable. This pretty much contained all of my favorite parts of the MCU post-Endgame, that being the street level stuff. And with the return of the Hulk, it fixed one of my biggest gripes with the MCU since Endgame. Thank heavens this didn't have any obvious connections to Doomsday. That really would have made me angry. I've come to a point in my life where I'm pretty much done with the MCU. It's not like I'm completely avoiding it. I'm obviously gonna watch Born Again Season 3 and whatever Spider-Man 5 might be. But I'm pretty much done with keeping up with the main stuff. A reboot isn't going to solve the problems Disney's made. It's so bad that when I heard Ryan Gosling, one of my favorite actors, was gonna play Ghost Rider, I felt nothing. That's sad. Spider-Man Brand New Day reminded me why I loved this franchise, and in many ways, it's probably gonna be my personal conclusion to this universe. I'll always be grateful to the Infinity Saga, not only for what it did for our culture, but for the impact it had on my life. I wouldn't care as much about films and comics if it weren't for those movies and those experiences. So, I'd like to leave on a high note, and I'd like to thank everyone who worked on all the projects I loved. I give Brand New Day a 9.5 out of 10. I had a few minor story nitpicks, and there were a few scenes where the special effects should have gone through another pass, but I thoroughly enjoyed this film, and it's easily the best of the Holland movies. Wow, I got really sidetracked here. So let's now talk about the other films that dominated this summer's box office. The beginning of this massive movie summer was, of course, Obsession. Now, I haven't seen the movie, so I can't give a proper review of it, but I think there are a few reasons why it did so well. While not original, the concept is inherently interesting as you got a character who gets granted a wish, but it goes terribly wrong. I can't say I've ever seen this specific situation as it involves a romantic relationship, so that adds a neat twist to the trope. Given the spell completely takes over Nikki, this obviously goes into themes about domestic abuse and sexual violence. These are pretty serious, but it's because of that horror is one of the best genres to explore these issues. Indian Navarrete is also great in the role. And no, I don't have to watch the film to know that. The famous scene that went around Instagram for a while perfectly showcases her skills.
No, don't do that!
The intonations on her nose is so creepy. Oh, it gives me the shivers. In the same scene, you can tell the real Nikki is trying to break free from the curse. It's all in her avoidant eye movements and her shaky breath.
You love me more than anyone in the world?
Yes, more than anyone.
It's pretty weird seeing this as the last time I saw her was in Superman and Lois, an absolute peak of a show. She starred as Jordan Kent's girlfriend and the dynamic between the two was great. Anyways, it's crazy that an incredibly niche actress, one who had to pay her bills via dog walking and Twitch streams, might have an incredible acting career because of this role. Props to her. Lastly, Obsession is part of the wave of YouTubers successfully making it to the big screen without much support from big studios. This started with Iron Lung back in January. This was perhaps the most impressive of the big three, as it was independently distributed and ended up being the #1 movie in America that weekend. Obsession would follow in mid-May, garnering about $500 million at the time of this recording. Backrooms was the last of the big three and released in late May 2026. Now, that I did watch, and I loved it. I'm not terminally online, so I wasn't, mad that there wasn't a Kanye song that appeared. Anyways, I really appreciated the way they built the world and incorporated the themes of liminality into the characters' journeys. I find this unsettling type of horror much more fascinating than jump scares or demonic entities. I just think it's more interesting and lends itself well to character studies. Bro, the part where Clark was eating from the duplicates was so weird. And I love the monster at the end. It just perfectly defined Clark's character. Absolute cinema. There's one other YouTuber-led film I didn't address, and that's The Amazing Digital Circus. Now, originally I thought this was some kids show, something akin to Cocomelon or Spidey and Friends, but my friend explained the premise of the show and it actually sounds really interesting. I hear it's, kind of takes similar themes from The Matrix, which is a movie I love, so I'm gonna try catching up on that show very soon. I haven't seen any of it, so I can't personally claim if it's good or not, but clearly it garnered enough attention to have a theatrical release, which is crazy. These success stories just go to show that people want to support projects with actual passion. Given these are small creators trying to tell an impactful story, rather than a conglomerate only focused on making money, people are far more willing to support these films and be less negative towards them. But it wasn't just indie projects that did well this summer. The Odyssey was the second biggest contributor to the biggest box office weekend in history. Now, I was pretty hesitant on this movie for a long time. A lot of the creative decisions do seem somewhat culturally insensitive to me, and to give it a $1.50, the amount of glaze Nolan's received has kind of soured my opinion on him, as I think his more recent films have kind of just been okay in my opinion. But clearly I'm in the minority here because the movie's made like $1 billion. Now, I did end up watching it, and yeah, it's pretty good. I'm not gonna glaze this movie too high end because there are definitely problems with it. For example, it does often just feel like a highlights reel of the book rather than following characters through a journey. Jumping around the timeline and the weird sound mixing were also a problem for me at certain points. But those are criticisms I have of Nolan's work in general, so I'm not gonna harp on that for too long, especially because it really is just a good movie. The way the themes are handled are great, all the actors were phenomenal, the action sequences were fun, and as always, it was visually stunning. The last act was basically flawless in my opinion, and that's like the most important thing a project needs to get right. Now I've changed my mindset that this is simply Nolan's interpretation of the Odyssey, not a faithful retelling. And while I can see that being problematic in some cases, with the amount of care Nolan has for the craft, I'm perfectly okay with it in this case. Christopher Nolan is probably the only director where his name actually sells a movie. You get that, a star-studded cast, and possibly one of the best stories ever told. He's got a recipe for box office gold. Even if I have my personal gripes with Nolan, he's a talented director passionate about his vision. He will never make slop. And especially in today's age, that's commendable. I give The Odyssey an 8 out of 10. Not perfect by any means, but a pretty great time at the theater. Though, I'm not gonna lie, I did enjoy Percy Jackson Season 2 more.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Before you yell at me, no, I'm not saying it's objectively better. I'm just saying that I personally enjoyed Percy Jackson's version of the story more, as I had a deeper connection to the characters. It's as simple as that. Well, okay, the sequence with Charybdis and Scylla was definitely better in Percy Jackson, but I digress. Before we move on to the big L's of the summer, I wanted to give an honorable mention to Toy Story 5, which crossed the $1 billion mark and was the third movie contributing to the biggest box office weekend. I haven't watched this movie, and to be honest, I probably won't unless I'm on an airplane, but I do appreciate the story it's trying to tell, that being exploring how traditional toys function in an iPad kid society. Toy Story has crossed the $1 billion mark since Toy Story 3, so its success isn't entirely surprising. But I probably shouldn't say that anymore, as we had a plethora of previously successful IPs that just crashed and burned this summer.
Failure.
I'm not going to break down these films as much as the previous section because at the end of the day, they were each the product of one thing: corporate trash. Whether or not these films were actually good, they were sold to the audience as an IP film meant to make shareholders happy. Mando and Grogu, for example, was only released in theaters because of Disney's failing streaming service. While not bad, Supergirl seemed like a continuation of a franchise, not a good story worth exploring. Whoever wrote that article saying it was gonna outperform Spider-Man is a complete moron, I'm sorry. One of the worst H articles ever. Finally, Mortal Kombat 2, Moana 2, Minions and Monsters, and Masters of the Universe were all banking on name recognition to get butts in seats. And that's not enough anymore. Look, I know there are people who enjoyed this movie, but I'm sorry, Masters of the Universe looked AI generated to me.
You don't want to be like this. This is disgusting. This is awful in every way. If I could kill it, I would. But I legally can't. But I've considered it.
That is not something I should ever say about a movie. And enough people saying that leads to people just not wanting to watch it. I'm sure Jared Leto playing Skeletor didn't help. Moana 2 was a garbage idea from the jump. Not only is it live action trash, but it's not nostalgic enough to garner audience attention. Minions and Monsters wasn't a flop or anything. In fact, it was actually pretty profitable, getting $450 million at the box office off an $85 million budget. However, this number doesn't fare well against other titles in this franchise, which, outside the first Despicable Me, have all earned about $1 billion. I don't think this is what Illumination was hoping for. Now, it should be noted that many of these underperformers were released during the World Cup. Disclosure Day, for example, literally came out during the tournament's premiere. Chat, you really should have delayed the film or kept your original May 15 release. This basically killed any chance of the movie doing well, and while it didn't flop, it looks like it'll barely make its budget back. The World Cup more than certainly distracted people from the theaters. It definitely did for me. That being said, it's very possible these films would have received the same outcome without the World Cup. Mando and Grogu, Masters of the Universe, and Mortal Kombat 2 remained mostly outside the time frame of the tournament. And the Odyssey released during the finale. There's not really an excuse to be made for these failures. There's nothing else to blame but yourselves. With that, let's finish off the video.
Because I'm not just Peter Parker. I'm Spider-Man.
Amidst failures left and right at the box office, the common consensus was that movie theaters did not have a good future. However, the weekend of August 1st, 2026 had the biggest box office weekend in history, proving that notion wrong. In an age of doom scrolling and social isolation propelled by greedy companies, people crave community. People crave shared experiences with one another. And the theater is one of those classic ways this happens. What this perfectly highlights is that people aren't so willing to put up with corporate garbage anymore. Theaters aren't dead. People's blind loyalty to brands is. And in my opinion, that is a massive win. Again, this isn't about whether you like these movies or not. I enjoyed Supergirl and had a decent time at the theater with Mando. But this should be a sign to studios that if you want your projects to do well, you have to put in the work to make us care. Success stories like Obsession or Brand New Day don't just happen out of the blue. It takes an entire creative team passionate about their work and wanting to tell an impactful story. The audience doesn't expect perfection, but we expect you to try. So, what are your thoughts on all this? What was your favorite movie this summer? Which one was the worst or most embarrassing? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.